If you've ever lived in a house where you never truly felt at home, you'll understand my story. Over time, our house lost its warmth and peace, as if the walls had become nothing more than piles of bricks. I wandered aimlessly within those walls. John, my husband, had lived the same routine for years: work, work, and more work. He worked long hours and barely spent time at home. Even though this had been the norm for years, I started to feel an enormous emptiness in my heart, because we hardly spent any time together anymore. Still, he always found a way to come home for dinner, and that was the one thread keeping our family together. But over time, even his returns became later and later, until we could only see each other briefly in the early hours of the morning. I tried to minimize how much this affected me and my mood. I knew how hard John worked to ensure we lived comfortably and lacked nothing. We had a beautiful home, a new car, and a healthy bank account. But at some point, I realized that material wealth wasn't filling the void inside me. I couldn't remember the last time John and I had a deep conversation about something other than work, numbers, or his endless meetings. The monotony of our lives began to trouble me deeply. Our home became even quieter when my daughter Sarah moved out to live with her fiancé, Michael. I no longer heard Sarah's laughter or saw her bedroom light glowing late into the night as she studied or watched a show. The silence amplified the emptiness I already felt. I tried to keep myself busy with housework and gardening, but the walls felt like they were closing in on me. Each day, each week, each month blurred into the next. Then one day, Michael had a minor accident at work. He slipped, fell, and injured his arm, which had to be put in a cast. Sarah had to travel out of town for work, leaving no one to look after him. Naturally, John and I invited him to stay with us until he recovered so we could help. Having someone else in the house unexpectedly brought me a sense of relief. Despite his injured arm, Michael was always kind and thoughtful. More than that, he started interesting conversations about books, life, and philosophy. One day, as I was helping him tie his shoelaces, I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't in a long time. Still, John's absence was palpable. He continued to come home late and retreat to his office after a few words of small talk. In my own home, I felt invisible, like a background character in my own life. Spending time with Michael became an unexpected comfort. Our conversations touched on topics I hadn't discussed in years: music, literature, and the meaning of life. As the days passed, I realized a connection was forming between us. Each morning, we'd wake up early, have a quick breakfast, and get on with tasks like cleaning his cast, helping him dress, or preparing meals. These moments gave me a strange sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, I felt useful and needed. One day, as I leaned in to button his shirt, I noticed how he looked at me. Our eyes met, and something stirred inside me. It wasn't an ordinary glance. My heart raced, and I quickly averted my eyes, focusing on the task at hand. But I couldn't shake the feeling that glance left me with. That afternoon, we spent time together as usual, talking, laughing, but there was a new tension between us. As the sun set, I felt a strange unease growing inside me. Though I didn't fully understand it at the time, I knew something had changed. Later that evening, while I was closing the blinds in the living room, Michael approached me and gently placed his good hand on my arm. I froze. When I turned to look at him, his lips met mine before I could think. Time seemed to stop. For the first time in years, I felt life flowing back into me. I lost myself in the moment, but after a few seconds, the weight of what had happened hit me. I pulled away, heart pounding with guilt, and fled to my room, leaving Michael behind. My mind was racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Over the next few days, I avoided Michael, pretending as if nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew something had changed. I no longer felt comfortable in my own home. To escape, I started spending more time outside, walking in the park, meeting friends. Yet every time I returned home, I felt Michael's gaze on me, and I knew I couldn't avoid the situation forever. John, oblivious to it all, continued his routine, coming home late, exchanging a few words, and shutting himself in his office. He didn't notice the tension in the house. His routine never wavered, and I began questioning whether our marriage could even be repaired. Maybe it was already too late. Maybe everything was over. One evening, when John came home, I tried to confront him. I wanted to share the loneliness and emotions I'd been carrying for months, but the words wouldn't come out. I stood there, torn between knocking on his office door and walking away. After everything that happened, life didn't return to normal. Michael and I tried to suppress the tension, keeping our conversation superficial, but it was never the same. At the same time, I resolved to face the growing distance with John and try to bridge the gap. I knew that while loyalty is vital in a marriage, so are emotional openness, honesty, and love. This story is one of internal conflict and complex emotions. Perhaps everyone carries a piece of lostness within them. The important thing is finding the right path and rediscovering oneself. As the weeks went by, the tension in the house became unbearable. Michael's arm healed, and he moved back to his apartment, leaving a strange emptiness behind. But his departure didn't erase what had happened, or what hadn't. The silence between John and me continued to grow, and I found myself wondering if I had truly tried to reach him, or if I had simply accepted the distance as inevitable. One evening, I mustered the courage to approach John. He was sitting in his office, staring at the screen as usual. I knocked softly, and he glanced at me, surprised. "Do you have a minute?" I asked, trying to sound calm. He nodded, setting his glasses down. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I sat across from him, feeling a lump in my throat. For years, I had swallowed my feelings, afraid of disrupting the fragile peace we had built. But now, I realized that silence wasn't peace. It was avoidance. "John, I feel like we've been living as strangers," I said, my voice trembling. "I know how hard you work for us, and I appreciate everything you've done. But I miss us. I miss talking to you, laughing with you, just being with you." He looked taken aback, as if he hadn't noticed the years slipping away. "I didn't know you felt this way," he admitted after a moment. I thought you were happy, that everything was fine." Tears welled up in my eyes. I tried to tell myself that. "But John, I'm not fine. And I don't think you are either." He leaned back in his chair, his expression conflicted. "Work has always been my way of providing for you, for Sarah. I thought if I worked hard enough, you'd never have to worry about anything. But maybe I lost sight of what really matters." We talked for hours that night, more than we had in years. For the first time, John opened up about the pressures he felt, the fear of failure that drove him to bury himself in work. And I shared the loneliness that had consumed me, the feeling of being invisible in my own home. It was painful, but it was real. In the days that followed, we made small changes. John started coming home earlier, and we began having dinner together again, just the two of us. We talked about our day, our dreams, and even our regrets. It wasn't easy. There were moments of discomfort and lingering resentment, but we were trying. One weekend, John surprised me by suggesting we take a short trip together. Just the two of us, he said with a shy smile. No work, no distractions. I think we need this. We drove to a quiet cabin by a lake, far from the noise and chaos of everyday life. At first, it felt strange, almost forced, to spend so much uninterrupted time together. But as the days passed, we rediscovered parts of each other we had forgotten. We laughed over silly jokes, shared stories from our youth, and sat in comfortable silence by the water. On the last night of the trip, as we watched the stars from the porch, John reached for my hand. I know I've let you down, he said softly, but I don't want to lose you. I'm ready to fight for us if you are. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. I'm ready too. Our journey wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was ours. Together, we began to rebuild what we had lost, not by pretending everything was fine, but by confronting our fears and flaws head-on. And for the first time in years, our house started to feel like home again.